and welcome to the iPEX virtual conference. This is a pre-recorded session on building a continuous improvement ecosystem. I am Theresa Heitman. I am a consultant and trainer for the Iowa Quality Center, and I work with organizations to help them develop and sustain their continuous improvement cultures. This is how our session is going to flow today. We'll talk about our objectives for the session. We'll have a discussion about ecosystems. Then we'll talk about the continuous improvement ecosystem. You'll use that system then to make an assessment of your own organization, after which you will develop a plan to improve your ecosystem, and then we'll wrap up. So my goal here for today is to send you home with a plan that you can start to implement and improve your continuous improvement ecosystem so that you have a sustainable continuous improvement culture. Our objectives are to learn the elements that are necessary to develop, nurture, and sustain a continuous improvement culture. Discover the components in each one of these elements to create a sustainable CI culture. We're going to use a simple tool to assess your organization's CI ecosystem and make a plan to address areas of opportunity. Ecosystems. Many of us are familiar with ecosystems. You were probably first introduced to ecosystems in middle school or junior high, and or in maybe in a high school biology class you talked about ecosystems. But an ecosystem in nature, or a natural ecosystem, includes all the living things, plants, animals, organisms, and humans in a given area. They interact with each other, and they interact with their non-living environment, like weather, earth, sun, soil, and atmosphere. Ecosystems are the foundation of the biosphere, and they determine the health of the entire Earth system. So when we think about an ecosystem and it being a foundation, I think about a continuous improvement ecosystem as being the foundation for creating a culture of continuous improvement. An ecosystem is a community of group of living organisms that interact with each other in a specific environment. The living and physical components are linked together. So it's very complex, and they are all interdependent on each other. Each one of these animals or these living organisms, we could say, lives in its own habitat. And if we want to compare our organization to a habitat, I would compare the functions of our organization to different habitats. And these different habitats interact with each other. It's actually, an ecosystem is quite complex in the way that it works. And we must create a favorable environment for us to have a balanced ecosystem and for us to have a healthy ecosystem. So what we're doing when we're building a continuous improvement ecosystem is we're focusing on creating a favorable environment for developing a culture of continuous improvement. Now, ecosystems are influenced by outside factors, aren't they? And they must change. And ecosystems do change and adapt over time. And our continuous improvement ecosystem also will change and adapt over time. There will be changes that come along that affect the ecosystem, and our ecosystem needs to be able to change and adapt to those new requirements, be they government or customer or suppliers. Above all, we want to create a favorable environment so that we have a balanced and effective ecosystem. This is my definition of the purpose of a CI ecosystem. You may have some different thoughts, things that you want to add or take away, but this is kind of my thought of what I think of when I think of having a CI ecosystem in place. What is the purpose of it? And that is to create and sustain a shared value system that promotes a customer-centric environment and improvement culture where all are focused on increasing the value delivered to our customers. And that is why we're all in business, isn't it? Why our organizations even exist is to meet the needs of customers. So we're going to develop a CI ecosystem. This is our desired state. Today, we're going to identify our current state, but this is where we want to head. We want to make a plan to reach this desired state. The continuous improvement ecosystem is healthy and sustainable for the long-term growth of your organization. The first thing that we need to make sure that we have in our mindset is a long-term view. It takes a long time to change a culture or to develop a culture. So there are many things that we need to do over time to change the mindset of people and to help people learn about what a continuous improvement culture means. So there will be many initiatives and many components that need to be put into place, and it's simply not possible to do all of these in a very short term. I always say we change culture one person at a time, as each person has an experience that shows them what continuous improvement can do for them and for their customer. Then you have won them over. So what does taking a long-term view look like? Well, it's going to be a little bit different for every organization, but it may take anywhere from 4 to 10 years. So it really is a long-term view, and it depends on how quickly you are able to implement initiatives in each one of the component areas of the elements. First of all, we need to understand the opportunity. We need to have a strategic plan for this, creating this ecosystem. We need to identify the metrics and make sure that those metrics don't drive the wrong behavior. So we need to have counter metrics in place so we have a balanced metric system. We need to invest in training for all of your employees. We need to keep everyone retrained or learning, creating a learning organization, and we need to keep all those people practicing. We want to start small, and we want to have, some short-term successes so that we can promote the success of the projects that we are doing and demonstrate what those results are. And we need to manage this whole process daily. We need to have leadership that goes out into the workplace every day. They are visible, they are active, and they are engaged. And we need to recognize, celebrate, and promote everything that we're also doing in this long-term view of establishing a balanced CI ecosystem. Now, many of you may have seen this model for continuous improvement implementation. Very often, this is how we approach implementing continuous improvement. We start with projects. We identify some projects in our organization. We do a great job of training the people that are going to be working on them. We support those projects and those project teams to execute their action plans, measure their results, and implement control plans. And then we have some evidence, if you will, to show or to communicate to the rest of our organization about the effectiveness of continuous improvement. Now, we want to get from a project approach to a continuous improvement culture. So these are some things that we employ along the way. We might create and implement a continuous improvement employee development plan. So we ask each employee to to take a certain amount of training so that they learn about CI. We may have some goals about engaging employees in practicing principles and concepts through daily improvement and through being involved in some larger projects. And we try to get people involved that way. And then we also collaborate with leadership to support the culture change needed to sustain continuous improvement. And all of these things kind of change our habits, and our culture changes with it. And we end up, after we have taken a long-term view and implemented all of these initiatives, we have created the culture that we set out to create. However, as you can imagine, there's many other components that will help you be more successful. And each one of these components here is actually quite large of an undertaking. So today we're going to talk about the CI ecosystem model, the elements, the major elements that are important to have in place, and then all the components within those elements that will ensure that your CI culture is sustainable over the long term to make your organization successful. This is the CI ecosystem model. We start with what's in the center. We have a customer-centric continuous improvement ecosystem. So we're focused on our customer and we're focused on making improvements to meet the needs of our customer. There are 6 elements that must be present in your ecosystem for your ecosystem to be balanced and able to sustain that culture of improvement. We must have a philosophy and mindset of continuous improvement. What are our thought processes? Are we thinking about involving everybody every day? Principles and concepts. Have we chosen a framework? Do we have a systematic process for solving problems? Do we have some tools and methods that can help us implement the improvements that we want to make? People leadership. How are we managing our people? Do we have the belief that the people that are doing the work are the best ones to figure out how to do the work better? Do we have respect in our organization as one of our key objectives? Do we have servant leadership? Are our leaders helping break down barriers? Are they supporting all of our employees? So leadership has a lot to do with building an ecosystem. Do our leaders have standard work? Are there communication systems in place? Do we have a strategy deployment system in place? There's a lot of standard work that belongs to our leadership that must be in place to sustain this ecosystem. As you can see, 2 of the 6 elements have to do with leadership. And with any other initiative that you are deploying within your organization, you know that the commitment and active involvement from leadership is going to make that successful. Next, we've got employee development. We need to train all of our employees. We need to provide them the opportunities to gain knowledge. And we need to have, is continuous improvement on your skills matrix? Is it part of your hiring process? We need to develop our employees so that they have the tools that they need to help make improvements for our organization. And then projects and practice. Identify key areas where we need to make improvements. Encourage our employees to experiment and practice and make improvements in their own daily work. So we're going to look at each of these elements and what the components are that go into these elements that you need to have present in your organization, in your ecosystem, in order to have a sustainable continuous improvement culture. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, one of our elements is about mindset, a continuous improvement mindset. Many of us are familiar with Albert Einstein quotes, but this is one of my favorite. Change starts from the inside. If you want your outside life to change, you first have to start with your mindset. Start learning how to learn, form new habits, learn new skills, and stop repeating what's not working. So let's take a look at the CI ecosystem assessment. What I'd like you to do is pause the video and take a few minutes to complete the assessment for your organization. There are 75 components that you will be rating for your organization. That sounds like a lot, but I don't want you to spend very much time on any one of those. Just read the component and then with your first impression, rate your organization. So it shouldn't take you more than about 5 to 7 minutes to do the assessment. The assessment can be accessed at a link on the session materials. And this is the link on the screen here. When you go to that link, you should be able to download the assessment into a Google Sheets file, and you should be able to edit it at that point. So go ahead and download the assessment and come back to the video, and we'll talk about what is in the assessment before you complete it. Okay, hopefully you've been able to download the assessment without any trouble. In this assessment, I've listed the elements along the left-hand side. We have CI philosophy and mindset, CI principles and concepts, people leadership, leader standard work, employee development, and CI projects and practice. And you'll notice down on line 92, you'll have your total score when you're finished with marking your assessment. Each one of these has several components that are listed, and just all you need to do is read the component. For example, the first one is CI is a way of thinking, a mindset. Do you ask yourself if this is present in your organization and to what extent? And just make your mark in that particular column. You should have 1 X or 1 mark per line. So when you get done your top score, if you've marked every component only 1 time per line, your top score is 88. So go ahead and take a few minutes, just read through them quickly and mark them as what your first impression is, and then come back to the video when you're finished. And as I mentioned before, your score will be in line 92, column F. And come back and we will discuss your findings a little bit. Welcome back. I hope you found that easy to do. You found some of those components kind of eye-opening, and whether you had them in your organization or not. By the way, I wanted to also mention that this is a great activity for your entire team to do. In fact, if I was thinking of coming up with some initiatives to strengthen my CI ecosystem, I would want to have my team involved in making the assessment. So be sure to include your team both in the assessment and in planning what initiatives that you'll be taking on in the future. This is a very simple assessment. Now you can not only look at your total score to kind of see which bucket that you fall into, but also look quickly at your assessment and maybe sort those columns, and you can see which one of those components maybe you're weak in, or where you have some presence but not that much, and then you can make some plans for improving your CI ecosystem from analyzing that information. If you have a score of 0 to 37, you probably have just started a CI implementation, and your CI implementation is very fragile. So I would suggest that you formulate 1 to 3 initiatives in each element. Make sure you cover all elements because we need to maintain balance, and that you can implement quickly. You communicate these initiatives to the entire organization and ask for everybody to get involved. Map out additional initiatives within the next 12 to 18 months, and then assess your progress and relaunch. And you may go ahead and continue, or maybe you need to relaunch your strategy. If your score is between 38 and 62, your CI culture is on track if your CI is less than 4 years old. If that's the case, keep doing what you're doing and make sure that you add and balance the initiatives across all elements to assure sustainability. Look for gaps in elements and develop initiatives to close them. Keep a long-term view and measure your progress. If you have a score between 38 and 62, and you have been developing your CI culture for many years, think about what is holding you back. Shake it up. You may need to relaunch your CI strategy to create excitement and change, or you may need to change your approach to a specific element, and go ahead and make some of those changes and then continue to assess your results. Maybe you found that you have initiatives or processes in place for all of the elements except for leader standard work. So maybe you need to focus on leader standard work to balance your system. And if you have a score of 63 to 88, your organization is well on its way to sustaining a CI culture for the long term. So continue to assess your ecosystem and focus on areas that need to be strengthened. Look for trends and gaps. And as we know, even if we're really good at things, there's still always room to get better. So I hope that was helpful for you and points you towards some areas where you can develop some initiatives to strengthen your ecosystem. I have identified a few initiatives and kind of tried to lay them out a little bit as examples of initiatives that you might have that would be focused on each one of these elements. So these are just examples for you. And then when I'm finished with showing you these examples, we'll have you take some time to develop your own improvement plan. So under the element of philosophy and mindset, we might have marked that we need improvement in the area of everybody every day. Here's an example of an initiative that may help with involving everyone every day. You may decide that you want to implement daily huddles or stand-up meetings. What would those huddles look like? Maybe you have a standard agenda. You discuss quality issues and potential solutions. You experiment with those solutions, try out those suggestions, and then report on a daily basis how things are going, and make changes to and train on standard work. As you can see, we've now talked about standard work and making daily improvements. So as you can see, you already start to see there are parts of components that interact with other components in other elements. So standard work would be one of those. As in an ecosystem, all of the parts of the ecosystem, living and non-living, interact with each other and create this very strong and balanced ecosystem. Under principles and concepts, here's a couple of ideas for you that may, if you need to strengthen, map the process, you could make an initiative to select a couple of areas so that it's not an overwhelming amount of work. You're going to use this map as a baseline for improvement, and you want to ensure employees are aware of the current best way to execute the work. So again, getting into standard work and using that process map to help you train employees, getting into employee development, and also interacting with standard work and eliminating waste. In this case, training employees would interact with employee development. An initiative for standard work and eliminating waste might be that you've decided to implement 5S in your accounting area. You want to train employees, again, employee development, and before and after pictures for documentation and set standards and maintain. So you're going to also be setting standard work. Under people leadership, maybe you'd like to increase the activeness and the visibility of your leadership. And one of the things that you might have identified as not having a strong presence is a communication system. So your initiative is to create a monthly meeting. At this meeting, you're going to be sharing knowledge because your teams are going to present their improvements. That is actually a form of recognition. And your leadership is also going to teach a tool. So your leadership is going to show that they are actively involved in continuous improvement. And then this is also going to be recorded and shared globally. And this becomes part of your leadership standard work also. Which leads us into the next element, where we might have selected initiative that would influence the improvement plan being aligned with the KPIs. And to do this, we've decided that we're going to implement some visual management to help connect metrics with the strategic KPIs. We're going to determine key quality metrics for 1 or 2 areas. So don't take on more than you can manage. You're going to post and track the metrics versus goals and standards so that it's very visible to everyone working in the process. And then you'll be assigning teams to determine improvement plans. And you'll be able to visibly see your improvement as time goes on. Under employee development, maybe we've decided that we want to improve our CI skills for everyone. So we need to do some training. We want to work with our HR to add a course that we're calling Practical Lean to everyone's employee development plan for the year. And we also have a goal of training 5 additional Lean practitioners. Under projects and practice, we need more coaches and facilitators. And so we're going to select employees that have CI experience to lead larger projects. And in this case, we've selected the framework for our organization of Lean. And we're also going to ask employees with the Lean practitioner training to coach other employees in their improvement projects. And this will be to strengthen our ability to coach and facilitate improvement projects. So you can kind of see how you can develop some initiatives for each one of those elements. In doing so, you're also strengthening components in some of the other elements. So pause the video and take a few minutes to identify opportunities and start an action plan to improve your CI ecosystem. And you can make your notes on the Excel file in column G, or you can start your own planning document. Again, the password to edit the file is iPEX. Have fun with that. Again, if you can involve your team in making those initiatives and deciding what your strategy will be, you will have a better plan in the end. And then when you have sketched out a few initiatives in each one of those elements, come back to the video and we'll wrap up. Through assessing your CI ecosystem and coming up with some initiatives for some of the components in some of the elements, you should strengthen the sustainability of your CI ecosystem and turn that into a long-term growth strategy. Remember, it's not the strongest or the most intelligent who survive, but those who are most adaptable to change. So make sure that your CI ecosystem is adaptable to change. Thank you for attending this recorded session of the iPEX 2021 virtual conference. I hope to have the privilege of meeting you in person in the future. Have a great day.